No offense to football, the baseball playoffs, anything else that's going on right now, the start of hockey season, the absolute best show on planet Earth when it comes to sports was in Memphis, Tennessee on Monday night. And it was Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and the Brooklyn Nets taking on the Memphis Grizzlies led by Morant and Desmond Bane. The Grizzlies came out victorious on what wound up to be a historic evening in FedExForum. Let's lock in and talk about it here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies, your choice for Memphis Grizzlies content first each and every day. We are available wherever you can get podcasts on YouTube. Rate, review, Spotify, rate, review, subscribe, however you get your podcasts, however you get YouTube videos, you can make Locked On Grizzlies a part of your Memphis Grizzlies experience. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined at this time by Damichael Cole. And before I welcome Damichael, who had a front row seat to a historic night in FedExForum there in Memphis, Tennessee, I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Damichael, beat reporter for the Commercial Appeal, covering these Memphis Grizzlies. It took us until Game 4 to get to our truly classic first regular season showing. And for some reason, it seems like the Brooklyn Nets bring it out in the Memphis Grizzlies. Desmond Bane struggling a little bit. The team as a whole maybe looking a little bit flat in Dallas, second night of a back-to-back, third game in 4 nights. Just give them a day off, and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in town, and it seems like the Grizzlies, especially Morant and Bane, rise up on what you were very privileged. I know you were working, but you have to be able to appreciate the greatness that was on display in Memphis between the Grizzlies and the Nets.
Yeah, you have to, Joe. And I mean, it was insane level of shot making. The Grizzlies had 2 players, Morant and Desmond Bane, 38 points each, 38 points for each player. And then the Brooklyn Nets, 2 players, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, 37 points for each player. And we're not talking about 37 on some type of crazy volume here. We're talking about Desmond Bane, 14 of 21.
That's
Kevin
crazy.
Durant, 14 of 20. Kyrie Irving, 14 of 24. Morant, 12 of 22 with 10 of 11 from the free throw line. Joe, none of them were missing. Each of the 4 guys, and it was the way it happened. It wasn't just all game long. Each guy had it going. Mm-hmm. It happened in big spurts, and it's like each guy had his own moment. We saw in the first quarter, Morant comes out 15 points in the first quarter, 24 points in the first half. You know how many points Desmond Bane had in the first half? Just 6.
Just 6. Not great.
32 points in the second half for Desmond Bane. Second quarter, third quarters, big Kevin Durant quarters. At the end of the third quarter, you know how many points Kevin Durant had? 35. Whew. He was the game high scorer after 3 quarters. He had 35. Only scored 2 points in the fourth. Well, guess what? You know who had 21 points in the fourth quarter? Kyrie Irving. I mean, that's what made this game what it was. Kyrie Irving wasn't just destroying the Grizzlies for the first 3 quarters. Then, boom, he outbursts. And Kevin Durant's got it going early. Morant's got it going early. Then Desmond Bane takes over. It was like each team had a passing of the baton, Joe.
It had a very distinct anything you can do, I can do better vibe, right? And it was 2 older guard players in the NBA and Kyrie and KD, obviously not too old to be productive. Most folks have the Brooklyn Nets as one of the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference and be in the NBA Finals. Not everybody, but if they play the way that they're capable of, and if KD can carry them, especially in that third quarter, it didn't matter who the Grizzlies had on him. Santi Aldama, John Conchar, Dylan Brooks. I think literally 4 or 5 different players. I wish they could have doubled him a little bit more. That would have been something I would have liked to see, try to get the ball out of his hands, but I'm sure there were reasons why. And as the game went on, Damichael, and I'm sure we'll talk about this throughout the show, they did a better job of forcing the ball into the hands of guys like Royce O'Neal, making them be the one to take the wide open shot. If you have to pick your poison, you'd much prefer Royce O'Neal be that guy over arguably the greatest scoring weapon in the history of the National Basketball Association. That dude's 7 foot tall, indefensible shot, silky smooth jumper. Again, you saw it in person. It must have been amazing to watch. And then you have Kyrie Irving, arguably the best ball handler in the NBA, just a true magician with the ball in his hands. But the two backcourt players for the Memphis Grizzlies were able to hold their own. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, as you alluded to, really special nights. I want to give a special shout out to Desmond Bane because he's had a slow start to the season, right? So much so, in fact, that people were concerned about injury. Maybe his back was still bothering him from the playoffs. Conditioning, I think you and I have talked about on this show in the past. Lots of possible reasons. Taylor Jenkins never wavered in his belief. Neither did I, Desmond. I just want to point that out. I didn't waver either. Not that you necessarily care, Mr. Bane. But Dez had a monster game. You mentioned his second half in particular. The Grizzlies need that Desmond Bane as long as Jaren Jackson Jr. is out, as long as Zaire Williams is out. They need him to show up and step up and be that second best player if the Grizzlies are going to beat good teams like the Brooklyn Nets. Because like you alluded to, Damichael, it's not like Brooklyn played poorly. I would say the Nets played a good basketball game. That was high-level basketball on display. The Grizzlies just made more plays, and Desmond Bane was a major piece of that puzzle.
We talk all the time, Joe, about how important is Desmond Bane. Because he's the perfect complementary player to Ja Morant, right?
Absolutely.
You got this downhill, slashing, quick, speedy point guard. And then you got this guy who can shoot the basketball so well and do these things. But here's the thing. The proof is in the numbers, Joe.
Sure.
The Grizzlies were down 5 to go into the half, 69-64. They were down 5 points. Desmond Bane scores 19 in the third quarter. And you know what happened after the third quarter? The Grizzlies were up 12. I think that says it all right there. The Grizzlies scored 45 points in that third quarter.
That's crazy.
45 points. I mean, if you watch those Detroit Pistons, San Antonio Spurs finals games back in the day, that's 3 quarters in those type games. But, I mean, 45 points in one quarter. Desmond Bane, 19 points himself. It's just to say, look, Desmond Bane shooting the basketball well, 8 of 11 from three-point range in this game. The way he shot the basketball and the way he's capable of scoring, if he plays, he doesn't have to shoot, 14 of 24, 14 of 21 from the field consistently. But if he plays at a high level, the level that people expect him to play at, which is basically another step above last season, this backcourt can go against anybody. They can go toe-to-toe. We saw them go toe-to-toe with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and I think that shows they can go toe-to-toe with anyone. How about this stat, Joe, from this game? Kyrie Irving, 37 points. Kevin Durant, 37 points. And then we mentioned Ja and Dez with 38. First game in NBA history that didn't go in a non-overtime game where 4 players scored more than 35 points. And it happened 2 from each team. You've never seen anything like it, Locked On Grizzlies fans. So that was special.
A literal historic night. And one more quick note on the brilliance of Ja Morant, not just physically, that lob dunk that he made off of a Tyus Jones pass that wasn't the best lob for an alley-oop. It looks physically impossible. I'm fairly confident only Ja Morant, maybe Zion Williamson. Those are probably the only 2 dudes in the NBA that can make that play at this stage. But my favorite Morant play was the one where he got Ben Simmons fouled out in terms of baiting Ben Simmons to take a pretty poor foul, and especially in a ticky-tack game where the officiating wasn't the best. Morant, I know in the post-game media availability, and you can go a little more in depth with this, Damichael, I know he talked about how he remembered from his rookie season when Ben Simmons would come and steal the ball from him when he's doing his let the ball come up the court, try to get as much time off the clock as possible. And he baited him. He knew that's what Simmons was going to do. Again, the athleticism, the explosiveness, that gets talked about on a daily basis about Ja Morant. To Draymond Green's credit, Ja Morant is one of the smartest basketball players in the National Basketball Association, and tonight was another example of that.
It was, Joe, and it blew my mind that he recalled that play.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to take you to what I saw leading up to the sequence.
Sure.
As Ja Morant's rolling the ball up the floor, you can see not only Ben Simmons, Nets players on the floor are frustrated. Steve Nash gets frustrated.
Very
Steve
angry.
Nash yells at the referees, and he says, "Why isn't the clock stopping?" Well, there wasn't a dead ball.
Right.
And, of course, the clock does not. Ja Morant stated this after, in his post-game presser. Again, the IQ kick it in. The clock's not going to stop to the 2-minute mark. This was around 4 minutes. If you look at the time, Ja Morant had about 24 seconds, basically a free shot clock, Joe, go off before, he had to pick up the ball. But, yeah, going back to your point, when he finally did pick up the ball, he stated he knew that Ben Simmons was going to press up on him because in the past, there was a time from his rookie year where he was dribbling the ball. And he was very lackadaisical. He looked up, Ben Simmons reached in, grabbed the ball, went the other way. Very embarrassing, right? So that probably played a role why he remembered it. But for him to recall that from, his rookie season and to pull that into play in that situation, and it was the 6th foul on Ben Simmons, which I thought
Massive
was
play.
huge because they weren't stopping Kyrie Irving on the other end at that point. And Ben Simmons, at that point, you were going to guard, Ja Morant with him, and that could have been your ace card. So you kind of took the ace card out of the Nets' hand, and the Grizzlies put them away easily.
Simmons is one of those players, kind of like a Draymond Green, that's very divisive among NBA Twitter folks and people that think he's not very good at basketball. It sounds like you and I are on the same page that Ben Simmons is actually very good at basketball. He's kind of like a super Kyle Anderson. He's good at pretty much everything except the whole, putting the ball in the basket idea. But, just a massive game from him. And losing him, as you mentioned, he has the athleticism and length to give Morant problems. We've seen bigger guards, bigger perimeter players. Anthony Edwards comes to mind with the Minnesota Timberwolves, really create issues for Ja. And I think Simmons could be that guy if he were on the floor late. He didn't have that opportunity. So shout out to Desmond Bane, shout out to Ja Morant. Safe to say those guys are not going to be looking for jobs anytime soon. They are set in terms of their employment. But maybe you're interested in finding someone to work a job for you. Perhaps you are on the lookout for a new hire for your small business. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right person for your team faster and for free. I'm very fortunate. I know Damichael's very fortunate. We haven't had to look for jobs anytime soon, but I know I've spoken with other Locked On hosts. I know that just in my own review of our various wonderful sponsors, LinkedIn Jobs is pretty impressive in terms of how they set things up. It's extremely easy to create a job post on LinkedIn Jobs. And then after you add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, you can spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Everybody this time of year is trying to finish the fiscal year strong, trying to finish the calendar year strong in terms of their business. The right team member can help you do that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I know that we talked about Ja Morant and Desmond Bane a lot in that previous segment to Michael Cole, and for good reason. They had historic evenings, quite literally. But I posted a tweet on my personal Twitter account that you can read. I'm still working on. Let's see, right there. Yeah, right there. At Joe Mullinax. You can follow me there. And I mentioned that Ja and Dez were going to get the headlines, understandably so. But the Memphis Grizzlies were not going to win that basketball game if it weren't for the efforts of Steven Adams and Santi Aldama. And wouldn't you know it, my best bud, my pal, my chum, the guy that, I kind of like a little bit, Desmond Bane, he said something very similar, almost the exact same thought in the post-game presser. I don't want to claim, Damichael, that he reads my tweets because I don't know that he does that. our relationship is kind of on the down low. I don't want to brag too much. I don't want people, I don't want to embarrass Des in terms of how close we are as friends. But we have a mind meld, right? We have very similar thoughts. And all joking aside, Desmond Bane pointing out the importance of Adams and Aldama, they were pretty vital to this Grizzlies team, doing the dirty work, playing some defense, rebounding. The effort in particular from Steven Adams was just phenomenal. And I noticed Damichael and Pete Pranica and Brevin Knight pointed this out on the broadcast. It was the first time all season that you saw consistent efforts to get Steven Adams involved as a facilitator, as a passer. Him and Desmond Bane, while Desmond Bane was going off, that connection that makes me a little jealous when I see it. It got rekindled. It got sparked again between Big Steve-O and Desmond. So I think that obviously the historic nature of what Morant and Bane did is worth praising, but I think we would be remiss, Damichael, if we didn't talk about the other guys in this particular Adams and Aldama in this particular instance, because I don't see the Grizzlies winning this game, even with the great offensive performances of Ja and Dez, without those two guys down low doing that dirty work and playing with such great effort and energy.
Yeah, I mean, Adams, another big rebounding game. I don't know what else.
So many extra possessions.
9 points, 13 rebounds, 4 offensive boards on his part. I mean, he controlled the glass. He controlled the glass. Santi had so many big scoring moments, and he was so efficient. 6 of 8, 2 of 4 from 3-point range. How about one of the block that he had? He really went up high, to take that block out the air. After one of his main baskets showed some emotion there, and Santi's having fun. You can tell that he's having fun, and Joe, I'll even take it a step further. Brandon Clark, yes, he was a negative. He was minus 10 again, which is kind of on par with his plus minus, over the first 3 games.
Sure.
But 13 points for Brandon Clark in his game. This was the first sign of, I think, the Brandon Clark that people have been looking for from the scoring perspective. I think the negative plus minus, you're just going to get that with the bench right now. Like that's just the reality of it. This bench is not one of the top benches in the NBA right now, but it is capable of getting there. Once you get Zaire Williams back, imagine once you move Santi Aldama to the second unit. Oh, I mean, it will be one of those benches eventually. But right now, David Roddy getting a lot of those minutes. Jake LaRavia is getting a lot of those minutes. You know how many points those two combined for in about 18 minutes of game action? 0.
Wow.
David LaRavia, Jake LaRavia combined 0 of 7 from the field, and they're contributing. They're playing hard. They're playing defense.
They're being asked to do more than they're ready to do.
Exactly. And the bench production came from John Conchar, Tyus Jones, and Brandon Clark scoring all of the bench points there. I believe that trio combined for 28 points. But, yeah, Steven Adams, Santi Aldama, huge nights. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal because we've talked about it, right? John Morant having all these big games. You need other people to step up. Well, Desmond Bane gives you 38. Santi Aldama, another big night for him. And then Steven Adams controlling the glass.
Tremendous effort. And again, the play that stands out in my mind when it comes to Big Steve-O is when I want to say it was him and Kyrie. I could be wrong about the Brooklyn net, but they were diving for the ball out of bounds. And you see Steven Adams, a massive human being. Like, I know you've seen him in person. I've had a chance to see him in person. He's just a gigantic human. Like, he's just very large. And to see him move that quickly with that force to try to secure, and he goes to the floor multiple times almost every game. And that is what they pay him to do. That is why he's there. We've talked about it on this show. I talked about it over at Grizzly Bear Blues back when I was the site manager. I know you've written about it over the Commercial Appeal. They pay this guy to be a big elite rebounder who can contribute to winning without having to score the basketball. They don't need him to score the basketball. Tonight is Exhibit A, right? Without Zaire Williams, without Jaren Jackson Jr., without a positive offensive showing from Dylan Brooks, which we'll talk about in our last segment, even considering all of that, you have got a guy who helps you win basketball games without having to score. And those things are so valuable when you've already got your 3 stars in place. John Morant, megastar. I think Desmond Bane has shown over a large sample size, a slow start to the season, but obviously this game he was elite. He is another star another star in the National Basketball Association. Jaren Jackson Jr., defensively, a star and should only continue to improve. You don't need guys that can score at this stage. You need players that accentuate and elevate the guys around them, and Steven Adams is more than capable of that. One more note on Santi Aldama. He's another home run for this development team, right? This coaching staff, the development guys, the trainers. To see him contribute the way that he did, he was the 30th pick just last year. So for 2 years in a row between Desmond Bane and Santi Aldama, the Memphis Grizzlies have hit home runs on the 30th overall pick because of how valuable those contracts are. You're paying that guy the lowest amount possible out of that draft class that has 4, it can be guaranteed years, obviously 2 team options at the end. It's just so amazing to me. They are in the position they are because they're able to develop and they're able to see what kind of skills they want. They don't care where you played. They don't care where you come from. Can you play basketball in a Memphis Grizzlies way? Santi Aldama is just the latest example. The jury's still out on LaRavia and Roddy. Way too early to make a determination on them. I think we can say Santi Aldama can ball in this Grizzlies system.
He can. He can. We've talked about all the things you want in a power forward. Taylor Jenkins mentioned the defensive versatility, the shooting, the chemistry. We've seen examples of all that. I mean, we've seen Santi Aldama, showing the emotion. You can see Ja after one of his M1 plays, he's showing the emotion, and Josh just staring at him so hard that I'm looking at Taylor Jenkins, and Taylor Jenkins is trying to get Ja Morant's attention, and he's just staring at he's staring at Santi Aldama and just like celebrating with him. And you see the chemistry, and the energy that he brings to this team. And then, of course, the scoring, the playmaking. We've seen him make a couple nice passes. He just fits what they want and, quite frankly, what they need with Jaren Jackson out right now.
Thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen game-to-game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game from across the National Basketball Association with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game-to-Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. When we come back, Damichael and I will close out this episode reviewing Grizzlies Nets with a player who made his triumphant return at the Brooklyn Nets Memphis Grizzlies shootout. Some good and some bad, as you might expect from one Dillon Brooks. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back, and we're going to talk about Dillon Brooks now. And I know that you are listening to this on whatever platform you love podcasts. You're listening to this and watching us on YouTube, and you're thinking to yourself one of two things. Either, wow, how great was it to have Dillon Brooks back? Or, oh my gosh, how terrible was it to have Dillon Brooks back? He's extremely polarizing. Damichael has talked about it. I've talked about it. That drove home again in this game. And you mentioned the numbers earlier, Damichael, so let's look at Dillon Brooks. Didn't make a single three, 2 for 13 from the field overall, extremely inefficient, only 4 points, had almost as many fouls as points, 3 fouls, 4 points, only 1 assist. But I'm going to take potentially a controversial stance here, Damichael. I know that's going to shock you, that I might be a bit controversial. I was okay with what Dillon Brooks did in this game. It was his first game of the season coming off of injury. Makes sense that he was going to be rusty, especially with the assignment of defending Kevin Durant. You could argue maybe outside of Giannis, there's no player that can play, and I guess Embiid as well, Luka Doncic. But Kevin Durant is an animal of his own self, right? He's a different class. Not to say that Luka and those guys can't eventually be that, but KD is just a professional scorer, and you see it at the highest level when he plays and when he's on. It was nice to have Dillon Brooks' body to throw at that. And the 1 assist that Dillon Brooks had was one of the best passes I've seen him make in a long time, Damichael. He made an extra pass to a wide open Desmond Bane. He had a good shot. He had a good shot. He decided that Dez's look was a better shot, made the extra pass. It was an extremely important moment in the game. And we talked about Ja Morant's basketball IQ reflecting on that moment. I think that's another moment that, those of us that follow the team, obviously you listening are a big Grizzlies fan, or you at least follow the team. That is a moment in a play that I want us to hold on to as the season grinds forth here, because Dillon Brooks, that is where he can help this team as another body to defend. He won't always struggle offensively that way. He'll be a little bit better. He's not going to be the most efficient player in the world, but he'll be better. And he'll always be willing to take on the toughest defensive assignment. But the willingness and the skill to be able to complete that pass and the experience necessary to be able to make the plays that Dillon does when it's winning time, that's valuable. That doesn't mean that they re-sign him. That doesn't mean that he doesn't get traded over the course of the season. Those things are on the table. But I do think that we need to appreciate what Dillon Brooks is capable of and what he brings to this roster, even in a poor shooting night.
Yeah. And as with Dillon Brooks, there's always so much to take away. I mean, my brain is moving around like
the outfit for one.
Because it starts with the outfit.
The drip, as they say, as the kids say.
And then when you get to the game, 2 minutes in, he has 2 fouls, and it's like, man. So I got a chance to talk to him in the locker room after the game, and got a lot of real good things from Dillon Brooks. For one, he admitted, look, he was a little amped up coming into this game. You get back, you get to go against Kevin Durant, and
return.
Yeah, he was ready to go. To the point where, he fouled him a couple times. One of them just was an excited foul. He just overplayed, I think, Kyrie Irving. So, excited to be back for one. And then, he had the sequence, he and Kevin Durant are trading the words. Dillon Brooks loves that stuff. Actually, Kevin Durant was mic'd up for that sequence, I've heard. So, might actually get even more intel on what was said there. But
is there an uncensored version of that? Is there an NBA After Dark that we can log into?
Dillon Brooks wouldn't give the full rundown, but he did.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, it's definitely for the best. So you had that sequence, and then you had the third quarter, which I thought echoes your point more than anything. And this is my thing with Dillon Brooks. Everyone says, "Oh, he shoots this is 2 of 13 from the field." My thing is, Kevin Durant was 14 of 17 at one point, shooting whatever he wanted. Yeah, you see he finished with 37 points. But let me tell you this. Kevin Durant could have had 50 if it wasn't for Dillon Brooks. And when I say 50, easy 50. He probably could have had 60. Every time Dillon Brooks went out the game, Kevin Durant had his way. It was Desmond Bane early in the first quarter when Dillon Brooks went out with the 2 fouls. Easy. It was John Conchar in the third quarter. And I remember the third quarter sequence in particular because I charted it and paid extra attention to it. Dillon Brooks on the previous, I think, 3 to 4 possession was checking Kevin Durant, and he was playing ball denial. He was making it hard for them to get Kevin Durant the ball. In fact, one possession, Ben Simmons was looking for Kevin Durant, and Dillon Brooks is just, he's working. He's all over him, bodying him up, denying. And Ben Simmons just didn't trust that pass. So he looks over to where Kyrie Irving is. And next thing you know, Ben Simmons lobs it in there and the ball gets tipped. And it's a turnover because he couldn't get the ball to Kevin Durant. All of that, those little things, that doesn't show up in the stat sheet for Ben Simmons. Someone else on the team got that steal. But for Dillon Brooks, that doesn't show up for Dillon Brooks. But someone else got that steal because Ben Simmons could not get the ball to Kevin Durant. As soon as Dillon Brooks checked out that game in the third quarter, Kevin Durant comes up the court, makes a quick 2-pointer over John Conchar. Then he comes on the next possession, pull up 3-pointer, foul, 5 quick points. Dillon Brooks not in the game. Dillon Brooks wanted that matchup. That's why he was so antsy. That's why he got the technical foul. In fact, I asked him, I said, look, how was it, Dillon? Because, Dillon's going to be honest with you. He watched Jalen Green score 30-plus points on this team. He watched Luka scored, 35 in 3 quarters? So how was it for you? Because I've been talking to some people, within the Grizzlies organization and everything. And it turns out Dillon Brooks has been itching to get back to play. He's been wanting to play, Joe, and they kind of had to hold him back. Like, hold up. It's an 82-game season.
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly, and he's been itching to get back. So I was like, how was it for you? Because I know you felt like you could play, and you wanted to play, against Houston. You watch them score, Jalen Green scored 30-plus. You watch Luka Doncic the next night scored 35. And he said it pissed me off. And I think that's why they call him the villain, Joe. It pissed them off.
Dillon Brooks is willing to be that dude. He's willing to be that dude, and every good basketball team needs that dude, right? When you're playing against the very best in the world, like a Kevin Durant, and physical defense, physical battling is not going to stop him. You got to go to the mental warfare, right? You got to get inside the guy's head. And there are a few in the NBA. I'll give props to Draymond Green and others. There are a few in the NBA that are as good at getting in people's heads as Dillon Brooks. Now, how much is that worth in terms of a contract? That's a great question. Who knows? But I do believe that he holds tremendous value for this Grizzlies franchise in that way. He is willing to be that guy that can take that step. Nobody else really is. And I think that that's not a knock on the rest of the Grizzlies roster. That is evidence to what Brooks means to the Memphis Grizzlies. So something to keep in mind and something to keep an eye out for as we continue on with this Memphis Grizzlies season. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. Make sure for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Damichael, we're back together on the next episode. I'm excited to kind of look at these 4 games overall and do an early takeaway, right? It's way too early to say anything conclusive about what is happening with the Grizzlies, but I have some opinions about how things have gone to this point. I'm sure you do as well. The Grizzlies have a day off, thankfully, a couple of days off as they prepare for a West Coast road trip. So it feels like a good time to reflect a little bit on this first week of the season.
Yeah, and no practice Tuesday. They're not practicing.
So a day off for you.
Yeah. And then more importantly than me, Locked On Grizzlies fans, everyone has been talking to me about the schedule. I've gotten a few emails and people saying, oh, that's not fair. The Grizzlies come out, they play 3 games in 4 nights. And then after those 4 nights, the 5th night, you're traveling back to Memphis. And then on the 6th night, you're playing the 4th game of the season. Well, guess what? They won't practice tomorrow. Then, they won't practice on Tuesday. Then you have, the day Wednesday, which I'm sure they'll probably travel at some point. And then you have the game on Thursday. So now the Grizzlies can kind of recover a little bit, get off their feet. And, Joe, you should see a refreshed team on Thursday.
And that's the good thing about them. Lots of energy, lots of excitement. It was nice to see them celebrate there with Rob Fisher at the end of the game as he was trying to talk to Desmond Bane, the dance that they do. The vibes remain immaculate, and I do think that there's something to that as much as it bothers me. There's something to be said for chemistry and the culture that those guys have built, that coaching staff, that front office. It's really fun to watch, and it's only going to continue to get better as the team gets healthier. Damichael, thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at DamichaelC. He does great work over there. I am Joe Mullinax. You can follow me at Joe Mullinax. We are your co-hosts for Locked On Grizzlies, the podcast that you can get access to each and every day via YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. For Damichael, I'm Joe. Until next time, stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. This is Locked On Grizzlies.